I noted right out of the gate that everyone who was being critical of Metroid Prime 4 Beyond didn't actually play it. The majority of people you saw on Twitter spurking about it, people like Mr. Medicare, people like Side Scrollers, people like Yellow Flash, people like Daka Daka, the endless amounts of Pretendo channels, pretty much everyone came out and tried to say the game was completely broken and unplayable before it came out. And that became very, very obvious upon release because everything these people were screaming about turned out to be a relative non-issue. Okay, Miles is not annoying. The characters are not like this awful genre destroying thing. The game is perfectly fine. There's certainly issues with the game, but as I've come to realize as I've played this, I'll talk about this in my actual final review. You haven't really seen a lot of people talk about the real problems with this game because these guys didn't actually play it. They were just like doom posting and making up all this nonsense and making all these like grand statements about how the Metroid IP was dead and how this was worse than Other M. Blatantly not true. Okay, at the very least, you can say this is better than Other M. Okay, we could definitely say that for a certainty at this stage. So what I find interesting about this though is just because is that at a certain point, immediately after release, every single one of the narratives was just imploded. Okay, it just completely evaporated. It was non-existent. Like immediately people began to point out that none of the complaints made any sense. Um, like for example, the whole narrative that nobody should ever talk in a Metroid game. The idea that like Metroid is about loneliness and isolation, and Beyond doesn't feel like that. You had people complaining about like the structure. You had people saying it was casualized, all of which have been shown to be not true. Okay, like it was interesting kind of seeing just how quickly the narrative imploded. People fought to try and keep you from playing this, and in the end, people bought and played it anyway, and were just like, no, this game is genuinely good. So what's happened is that a lot of these grifters have buckled down, bought the game, and are now trying to play through it. Like I've seen several people try and say that, like, I 100% of the game. It was the worst game I've ever played in my life. Like, it's just a grift. Don't believe it. You're telling me that you 100% of the game in a day. You took 10 hours to just play through this new Metroid game, like day one. But it's like, oh, but it was also the worst game you ever played. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like that's just the reality of it. Like, if you just look at the narrative versus reality, if you look just how like hotly contested all this is, the simple fact of the matter is that like all of the praise this game gets holds up and all the criticism does not. Like, I think over time, people will have like real criticisms about this game. People will have real issues with the plot and the characterization, like I do, right? But like, I'm not sitting here trying to say that like Metroid Prime 4 is like the worst game in the series or the worst game ever made or something that's going to kill the Metroid Prime IP. Like, because obviously that's ridiculous. Okay, that's just not going to happen. Like, all the problems this game does have would be easily fixable with a sequel. Like, there is far more to like about this game than to dislike. I feel like the 8 out of 10 scores are perfectly justified because it's not some huge genre defining masterpiece, but at the same time, it didn't really need to be because this is a game made for a niche audience. This is Metroid has never been that big of a Nintendo IP. Like, I was perfectly happy with it. There are definitely some things about it that I was very frustrated with. Like, why is there a racetrack? Like things like that really feel out of place. But like on the whole, as a whole, like I found myself like very, very much enjoying this game's high points. Like, the way I would describe it is that this game has like some of the lowest lows I think I've seen in any Metroid game, but on the flip side, they're very few and far between, and the rest of the game is genuinely stellar. Like, if it was more like even, like I could see this game being like, more in like the 9 out of 10 range. Like, that's my main problem with it, is that the quality seems like rather uneven as opposed to just an all around like uh like all around good experience. Like like if they just it really does feel like to me that the game was rushed. You know, there's all these weird like graphical issues, like and like all these weird bits. Like I had this like weird thing happen to me where like I'm running along this platform and then like the robot that's following me just kind of like jumps in the pit like behind me like 5 times and like keeps despawning when I needed him to like cross. It was weird and it made no sense. But like, you know, things like that make me feel like the game was unfinished and that like it really, really needed another year or so. Like it really feels like they rushed this out for the Switch 2 launch specifically. And I really don't think they should have done that. I suppose like they just wanted to get this project out, you know, just get it out of the way and then move on to the next thing. And that's what I hope happened because like I just don't understand like why some of these decisions were made. Like outside of this idea that it was like rushed, you know, it's just that's the only thing I can come up with. Like, but like, you know, they took so much time for this to make this project in general. I hope that they learn from the sequel and like you know correct some of these problems. Like at the very least, the follow up shouldn't have the same kind of development issues that this had. Like I don't think it's going to take another 7 years for the sequel, but like that's just my mindset. Like you know, looking at this is that like yeah, there are things you can like nitpick and complain about. Like I'm seeing a lot of people talk about like the length of time we had to wait. Like I'm seeing a lot of people talk about like Viola and like things like that. And there's definitely like criticisms to be had here. You know, I've been very critical of this release over the years, but like in general, like honestly, like I think this game was like quite a lot better than what I was expecting. And that's kind of what I'm seeing from like a lot of the people, especially the people who were like initially very critical of the game and thought it was like we're saying it was a complete disaster. Like the more people play it, the more people realize it's like pretty solid. Like, and again, it's not the greatest game ever, but like at the same time, like there are just so many other better Nintendo games out there. So like that's kind of my mentality is that like this could have been a lot better for sure, but at the same time, like the people who are sitting there screaming about how this is like gonna destroy the IP, they're just completely delusional. And I think over time, like as more and more people play this, like I think this is gonna be like fairly popular for what it is, you know, like like you're seeing a lot of people do this thing where they're like, oh, you know, it's kind of similar to older Metroid Prime games, which shouldn't be a criticism because like nothing's really like done the same thing that Metroid Prime has done. But like I feel like people who have never played the original trilogy would really enjoy this for what it is. That's kind of my feeling on it because at my core of cores, like my primary complaint with this game is that it's just not as good as the first three. Is just is just my genuine feeling on it. And there are like those are like some of the best games ever produced. You know what I mean? Like some of the best games on GameCube and Wii. Like the fact that 4 isn't as good as those isn't really like downplaying it at all. Like it's just a solid first person adventure game from like a new team at Retro, like who wanted to do something a little bit different, who had a lot of interesting ideas, and some of them work and like some of them don't. And I think this is just to me, like this reminds me a lot of Twilight Princess, actually. Like that's the comparison I came up with when I was playing this. Is that it feels like the new team is like trying to imitate like what came before. They're trying to like recapture what they did while still giving like their own like kind of little like twist to it. And like what ends up happening when you do that is that you just kind of people just kind of like universally agree like the old one was better. But at the same time, you know, like younger players who grew up with Twilight Princess are like very attached to it. Like I knew people who like you know, I knew a girl who played through that game like 18 times, like within like a year. You know what I mean? Like I knew people who never got tired of Twilight Princess, who like loved it more than anything. And like Prime 4, I think, kind of has that same kind of energy in that like if you play a ton of games, like yeah, it might come off as underwhelming, but if you're someone who's like playing this this genre or this series for the first time, I think you're going to come away with like a very positive experience towards it. Honestly, that's kind of my mentality looking at this, is that like Prime 4 seems to be very, very successful, but older fans may not necessarily be ecstatic about everything that this game does. And it's a very necessary thing, I feel like, because Metroid fans are like old as dirt now. Like I'm seeing a lot of people saying that like they grew up with the original 1986 release, the game that came out 40 years ago. Okay, like I'm seeing so many people like talking about how they were huge Metroid fans back in the day, and like, oh, it's way different than it was when Super came out. Like the series needs to evolve. Okay, like that's just the reality of it, is that it does need to grow, it does need to do new things. And like Tanabe seems to, more than anyone, seem to understand that the natural evolution of the Metroid IP is to give more focus to the Galactic Federation troopers. That's what I find really interesting about this, is that like they put a lot of effort into like the troopers, their personalities, their backgrounds, their fighting styles, especially. They all do like radically different things as you when you meet them. And they even use like different kinds of weapons, right? So when you take that into consideration, like it feels like what they're trying to do is flesh out the Galactic Federation as more as like a legitimate faction in the setting, instead of just like some vague like superior. I feel like that's the right direction to go in, like to make Metroid more mainstream. And I think Tanabe understands that. And I think this is like the next major step to make that happen. But it it's very interesting to see like how many people are like against the idea. It's something that I think is going to be like a very polarizing decision for Metroid to go in. But at the same time, like I think they've already kind of established like the formula for this going forward, how Samus is working alongside the Galactic Federation, how she is doing things with them, and how like other characters from that faction may play into like the overall plot and the story, and like like it'll be very, very interesting to see what they do going forward. But I will say that like I know that a lot of people don't like the Federation in this, but the characters themselves are the best we've ever gotten in that regard. You can argue that the Prime 3 hunters are way more interesting with their designs and backgrounds and like powers and stuff like that. But when it comes to like actual generic like Galactic Federation troopers, like this is the best we've ever gotten. They actually tried to give them a personality. They actually tried to give them a role in the plot. They actually tried to do things with them. And I think that effort really should be commended, because I could see this becoming a huge deal in future installments. Like we just have to wait and see.